So removing the external application from the equation and just boom, having that be Moon. And so you click on your profile, you can modify your authentication settings, your security settings. You can see your notifications. You can, let's say, message someone else who has a Moon wallet. All of that becomes possible and kind of deepens the usability and your connection to the user.
So before I get into this, I do want to ask about the marketing. So earlier in the conversation, you mentioned that by having good yield, being transparent, having proprietary software, these are all things that are going to help out with marketing. But back during the bull run, you weren't really doing too much incentives, etc. So now moving forward, what is your plan of attack to get out this information about Reliquary, about Ethos, Moon, Reaper Farm? Is it just coming onto channels such as this one and doing across the chains as a form of kind of marketing in a sense? Or do you have different strategies?
Yeah. Kind of typical, like, direct-to-consumer marketing, like, hey, you know, we exist. I'm Justin Bebis. I have some domain knowledge you might find interesting. We do that a lot. You know, I do the circuit. We, of course, have block bytes, a lot of access there, a ton of stuff going on B2B. So we're plugging into other teams, other firms, financial institutions, getting them to know us, getting them to know what our deal is. Governance proposals we've been working on, trying to get plugged into the Ethereum ecosystem, kind of break out of our current bubble, which is a lot of work, but we've been making a lot of progress. And like I said, like, we have a lot of users. They rotate in and out based on interest rates are, but marketing dollars are over twice as effective during recessions than otherwise. So we're over the bull run, we're like, there's way too much noise to be, you know, spending all our money on marketing. Now it's like, hey, you know, we have all of our firepower. Everybody spent theirs all 2021. Now is the time for us to strike and take market share. So that's the idea. And I think we probably have another year of pain in the markets. You know, I'm not a financial advisor again, but, you know, we're planning for a pretty long bear market as kind of the counterparty to that crazy bull market. And we're really, really ready for all of these other teams that are kind of exhausted, tired, worn out of money. We're ready to just kind of step up and be like, well, look who it is, you know, it's the Byte Masons. We're going to change finance forever. We're going to give you your financial security and freedom. And, you know, we're not going to steal your money like everybody else seems to want to do. So yeah, it's a pretty simple game plan. There's just so much less noise that our signal actually gets through, which is cool.
Beautiful. So let's just quickly go through a little bit deeper into this ecosystem. Now, Moon is at the top, and there's been discussions about it, but I can't wrap my head around it. So let's go a little bit deeper here. So what I understand is that it allows new crypto users to get onboarded easily. So potentially they could create a new wallet and have the ability to get into Reliquary or Ethos, get great yield without doing too much. Should be super simple. But there's also more components to that I saw, such as potentially allows regular websites such as Web2 or regular businesses now to implement crypto features. So I'm left wondering, is this going to be a wallet similar to a MetaMask? Is this going to be a website where you just go and it seems really easy? Can you give more context about this?
Yeah, so you actually have it backwards. We're not trying to give Web2 businesses Web3 powers.
Okay.
We're trying to give Web3 businesses Web2 powers.
Oh, okay.
So Web2 powers being easy login, easy account management, notifications, messaging, I guess, if you really want. And, you know, easy on-ramping, off-ramping. The problem with Web3 apps is you go on it, like, compare the UX of a Web3 app to your favorite, like, social media website or tech website. It's like night and day. It's like one was developed by 2 cavemen and one was developed by 1,000 interns. No, but, you know, it's just like Web3 apps, and the problem with that is we just don't have infrastructure that can connect to the blockchain. So notifications, it's like, sure, notifications are possible, but we're pulling these notifications from this kind of siloed network here. And oh, there are also like 10 more of those networks, you know. So, you know, with Moon, not only are we able to abstract the account making process, so you don't have to remember a seed phrase or 12 words or whatever, we can use hardware security cloud architecture to make a truly secure, truly kind of one-to-one wallet management system. And then at that point, it's just about how do we handle authentication? How do we handle account recovery? How do we handle all this cool stuff? Maybe we don't want account recovery because if you've ever played RuneScape, I'm just kidding, but it's a common way to hack accounts. But yeah, it's like we want to make it as easy to use Web3 apps and use DeFi as it is to use your favorite social media or content website. You know, we want it to be as easy as using freaking Etsy. You know, and we're just not there yet, but we will be. And Moon is our effort to take all of these tech things that we need to do and just own them in the context of our application. So it's like, hey, we have all these freaking users, you know, we want to onboard them easily. If we have 100,000 users and those users are paying a 0.1% fee to onboard through a third party or create a wallet abstraction from a third party, the money we make developing all this stuff will you know, save so much for our users and allow us to capture that revenue. And the thing is, like, we are an engineering firm, so making software solutions to us is like easier than figuring out how to structure a value proposition with all of these software as a service companies trying to take pieces of it. So Moon is like an infrastructure business, a social Web3 infrastructure business or aspect to our business. And then, you know, we can turn it into a platform or whatever.
Do you see that as then being, let's say, like a website similar to a social media where you just type it in on your browser, you know, into Chrome, moon.crypto, whatever it may be? And it's,
I see it as something that's natively integrated into our apps and maybe others. So more like an SDK, because the problem with MetaMask is it's separate. So it needs to send messages back and forth to actually do anything. So the UX is clunky, it's annoying. But with Moon, we can integrate this stuff natively. So you're clicking a button within our website to make your first wallet or to make a new wallet. And sure, you can use MetaMask or you can use whatever you want, but using Moon and having all this native, like, okay, you do that. Now you get notifications for our app through Moon, which we can plug into and serve up to you. And having that native integration means we can have servers running 24/7 that are dedicated to this app and purpose built through the Moon SDK and through all of this Moon infrastructure to serve the users of our app. So we can kind of purpose build all this stuff and integrate it really deeply to just chop off the clunky UX that browser extensions force users to use. And we see that as like a really big problem. And it is the standard right now. It's a really poor standard, the browser extension thing. Like, what the hell is the security model of a browser extension? You know, it's like how many NPM libraries does MetaMask import? It's kind of like it's a pure hell. So just to avoid that liability, to avoid that cost, to avoid that poor UX, we're building everything from scratch in-house, not depending on a bunch of crap, just focusing on security, usability, and integratability to make our tech stack even better. And going back to like the business-to-business offering, it's like, okay, now we have all this proprietary wallet and onboarding tech. There's like a plus 10. So now not only do you have better financial technology than your competitors, but hey, you can onboard easy peasy lemon squeezy with our Moon SDK. And I like to imagine it like you have your Web3 app. What a Web3 app doesn't have that all these other apps have is like you have your profile button, you have your create account and your login button. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So removing the external application from the equation and just boom, having that be Moon. And so you click on your profile, you can modify your authentication settings, your security settings. You can see your notifications. You can, let's say, message someone else who has a Moon wallet. All of that becomes possible and kind of deepens the usability and your connection to the user. And that's the whole purpose. And it's like we have all these apps. We need infrastructure. We need best-in-class infrastructure that doesn't exist. Okay, we make it through Moon, and side effect, oh, now we have like a business that everybody else needs, you know, that's built by people who need to solve these problems for themselves. So people that are intimately familiar with the problems and the best ways to solve them. And again, like that's what makes our team so cool is we have like, we're problem solvers, you know, and that's like our whole purpose. And, you know, Moon is solving some of the biggest problems that are impeding mass adoption of crypto. It's like not very expensive for us to develop, and the problems are very interesting, and it gives a huge advantage to all of our businesses. And all of our entities and all of our apps.
And so imagine if I were to go on Reaper Farm and instead of having now MetaMask as a little Chrome extension, have it be buggy and waiting, et cetera, I simply can do, let's say, a login or create account, boom. Now I have my account, I see my funds. It hopefully performance would be better because it's integrated. And then likewise, if I were to go to Reliquary, then all of a sudden I would see that same login. I'd already be logged in, good to go. And then regardless of which app I go to, if I'm already logged into, let's say, Reaper Farm, then I'm logged into Reliquary as well?
Probably not. I mean, we're not going to like force you to log in. I mean, you'll have a Moon account, so we can share that across every app. And then you just log in with your Moon credentials. And essentially, like we have this hardware security architecture in the cloud that's signing transactions for you. And like imagine that's like your you know, mech suit or whatever, or like a robot you're controlling that's like hyper secure. You don't need to like have the private keys. You don't need to have anything. And now you can interact with it like you'd interact with any application. And the security model is way better because you don't have to hold your keys, and you're the only person that can access your keys because it's a hardware security system, and it's in the cloud, so you can access it from anywhere. And you can do it with normal authentication methods like Google Passkey, Google Email Auth. And then one of the cool things about kind of the wallet abstraction that we're making is, let's say we look into your wallet, you are making a transaction. Okay, let's say first we analyze that transaction with a static analyzer, figure out if it could be malicious or not, and give you a warning if it seems malicious, or force another level of authentication if it could be malicious. So you sign in with your 2FA, pretty simple. You know, you sign in with your email, you put in your password, great. Let's say that's compromised. Again, we analyze, let's say, oh, this person's transferring out, you know, 100% of their portfolio or 50% of their portfolio, or this person's transferring a Bored Ape to a random address that they've never interacted with before. At that point, we could be like, okay, answer the text message we just sent you, or confirm on your authentication app on your phone that you actually mean to do this. And we're going to send you a notification to let you know that this is happening to your devices, so you can, you know, have some time to stop it. These are the sort of things that people have come to expect in banking and in finance. And there's like this narrative that's like, you know, we need to hold onto our keys. Otherwise, like, everything is insecure and the world is going to end. But you can have things be more secure in the cloud using cryptography and using hardware security. And that's like literally all the blockchain is. You know, it's a hyper secure thing going on in the cloud. So people needing to like pocket their seed phrase and being able to just like, if you gain access to that seed phrase, it's just you're entitled to everything, game over. You know, wrapping that in a typical highly secure, highly tested authentication model, like you'd see on a centralized exchange or similar, that's what needs to happen. And that's what Moon is going to deliver, in addition to all the like on-ramping, off-ramping, quality of life stuff. The wallet abstraction, I think, is the biggest thing that you can possibly do, in my opinion.
So by putting it into the cloud, this may be a dumb question, but is it possible then for, let's say, the government to then go to, let's say, Google, who is running the clouds, and say, hey, we're noticing something's happening here. Can you put a stop on these funds, or can you take it that way? Because that would be one benefit of having a seed phrase at home, having it well kept. Is like, okay, you got to like physically bust in through here, do something. But if it were to be on the cloud, that would make me start to question, are there different ways on how to access that?
No, is the short answer to that. You need to build backdoors. So if the feds want access to your vault, so first of all, using an HSM server, so using a hardware server that relies on hardware level authentication, there really isn't a way to build a software, you know, backdoor. I mean, there is, but it would have to happen like on account creation. And like these security models aren't really used outside of like very high value, like key storage or secret storage. And using them for Web3 is really a no-brainer. So as far as like building backdoors, things like that, really the only thing that could happen, or the only issue that could occur, is, for example, a front-end takedown. Like, let's say user interacts through these applications using the Moon wallet through a front end, and let's say they don't really know how to sign transactions manually. They don't know how to write transactions manually, which is a problem across the board with Web3, Web2, whatever. And that's something that Web3 also solves. So talking about like IPFS gateways, you know, ways to increase the robustness for users who can't necessarily just, you know, write a transaction and shoot it with their authentication parameters at the hardware vault. So that's like a really big one, is how can we insulate users from like UX destruction? Because for most people, like a front end being taken down is as bad as like a smart contract being evaporated or an exploit, because they have no idea how to interact. And, you know, complying is a good way to avoid that, like being strong with the compliance like we are, and then creating decentralized hosting solutions or taking advantage of decentralized hosting solutions. But there's no perfect solution for the layman, because the layman needs to rely on abstraction. And that's really tough. Like, even if they owned their private key and they didn't have a front end, or they didn't have a way to compose these transactions, you know, they're kind of borked anyway. It's really like the connection between the application and the server is the weak point there, much like with any app. But not being able to like whip someone with a garden hose to get their private keys, I think is a very good value add, because like getting robbed for private keys happens, and using this, you know, hardware cloud architecture, we can kind of avoid that being a reality while still using cryptography to make it kind of a one-to-one, like very private, very secure interaction at the user level.
Cool. So let's go now into ETHOS. So that's the stable coin. Well, let's first talk about what you would deposit. What type would it be, USDC? And then behind the scenes, what is the, I should say, the assets backing? Is it Bitcoin, Ethereum, and how much would it be percentage-wise?
Yeah. Well, you deposit Bitcoin or Ethereum.
Okay.
How much would it be? I guess depends on who our customers are. Typical DeFi protocol. Really, the secret sauce is we're taking the reserves. So you get your stable coin, great. We're taking those reserves and we're farming risk-free interest. With 1% interest, we can maintain a pretty consistent 6% APY for eUSD if we're farming that with the reserves. Like, let's say 60% of the reserves, we're lending it to Euler or to Aave or to Compound, or for Ethereum, we're exposing ourselves to staked ETH interest. That revenue is able to kind of fund growth. Similar to how I've been talking about Granary, that's kind of like a really important way to make these systems sustainable. Is we're creating financial products. You need yield, you need incentives, 100%. That's how finance is able to exist. So Ethos is able to fund that consistently and sustainably. And that's kind of the important thing. So we're only doing Bitcoin and Ethereum because they're like the most off-risk assets that you can get. And it just kind of makes sense because we're trying to create something that is antithetical to your USDC, where USDC exists to be centralized. It exists so that it can interact with jurisdictions, regulatory bodies, whatever, and on and off-ramp fiat. So that's why USDC exists. It's not the best thing to hold in your wallet because the CIA can just turn it off. The FBI can just turn it off. Anyone can turn it off that has access to the USDC keys. So that's a big kind of glaring weakness, especially in light of OFAC sanctions, because USDC is just pausing first-degree OFAC violations and making people litigate to get access back. A lot of people who might not even have access to the tools needed. So what Ethos does is, okay, here's eUSD. So we can provide a level of interest that's comparable to, let's say, regular USD with the Fed rate of 4.2% or whatever it is right now. So here's a purely decentralized, uncensorable product that can compete toe-to-toe. And it's focused on Bitcoin and ETH, so you know you're not being exposed to any weird downside risk, which is the main sort of deal. So this is an asset we're creating to be kind of a headliner stablecoin in DeFi. And again, like stepping way ahead with the tech and having like all of our marketing firepower in the form of incentives, we can penetrate the market pretty reliably, especially over longer timeframes, as we're generating way more revenue than anyone else. So that's kind of the whole point of Ethos. And if you're familiar with Liquidity, we built it on the Liquidity protocol, so taking advantage of liquidations and debt management. And then we added multi-collateral support in a way that's isolated. So each of these collateral pools are totally isolated, but they operate in tandem and they pay out liquidators in tandem, which is something that doesn't really happen elsewhere. So we've taken all the strengths of Liquidity, we've fixed the bugs, we've fixed the weaknesses, and now we've created a way to unlock those reserves and use those to fund the growth of the protocol.
What would you say to somebody then that said, Justin, that sounds great, 4% on a stable coin, well done, definitely going to trust that everything's great with that, but regardless, it's not really worth the risk for them to get into a stable coin for just 4% yield. They don't see the benefit. What would you tell that person?
Ethos is not for you. I mean, stable coins have like the biggest or second biggest, third biggest, whatever market cap of crypto assets for a reason. People want them. They're very, very useful. And for people who bank with DeFi, you want that quality interest. You want those high interest rates. And 3-4% is high for a stable asset. If you're measuring all of your investments against holding eUSD. If you're calculating EV based on eUSD rate or based on like a LIBOR or Fed rate, then eUSD is going to be the best. Ethos is going to be the best. You know, nothing can compete. Now, if you see 3-4% on a stable coin, possibly pushing 6-7% during periods of volatility, and you're like, dude, that's stupid. Then stable coins might not be for you, and Ethos Reserve might not be for you. And let me show you Reliquary, sir, where you can hold your beautiful volatile assets and take advantage of interest on those. But yeah, it's an off-risk product for off-risk people. And most people are not really off-risk. Your typical DeFi farmer, they're not off-risk. But your hedge fund manager, your institution, your private equity fund, they are off-risk. They're way off-risk. And Ethos is a product for them, along with kind of people who manage their own kind of wide capital pools and people with larger balance sheets. But the cool thing is, like, now you have a way to create a delta neutral hedge against your Bitcoin and against your ETH throughout the bear market. So it's like, hey, I need firepower, but I don't want to sell my Bitcoin and ETH for tax reasons or for any other reason. Hop in Ethos, get that really capital efficient loan, and go to work. And that's the power of Ethos. And you can go to work knowing that all of your transactions will be uncensorable, knowing that the collateral pool is uncensorable, and knowing that if you wanted, you can just hop in and take the yield. So it's like, if you're a trader holding eUSD and trading against eUSD and using eUSD as your primary means of settlement is awesome, because when you're out of the market, when you're not trading, let's say you close a position, you're like, okay, you know, I'm going to look for my next opportunity. I know I'll get 4 to 6% staking my USD in Ethos. And I don't have to swap, and I don't have to deal with USDC sitting in Coinbase for 0.1% or whatever. So yeah, it's just like a fabulous utility, whether you're depositing assets to take out a loan or whether you're just buying eUSD off the market and making it part of your kind of asset rotation, just to stay out of USDC or USDT. And those are great assets for off-ramping and on-ramping. But on-chain, what's the point? I guess the point is they're very liquid, but we're going to be building a lot of deep liquidity for eUSD. So I look forward to fighting the stablecoin market, because it is the biggest, one of the most vibrant markets in DeFi, and coming at it with a very unique high-tech offering is going to be very exciting, I think, for us. And then, of course, there's like the oath staking and the revenue sharing for our users, which is always very fun to participate in.
So you mentioned that eUSD is going to be risk off and that it is safe yield. How is that possible? Bitcoin is volatile. Ethereum is volatile. What if something completely goes horribly wrong with Ethereum, with what's going on, and then you're like, well, then shouldn't the stablecoin then be junk then as a result?
Yeah, so that's what liquidations are for. So first of all, if something goes terribly wrong with Bitcoin or Ethereum, I don't know if anywhere is going to really save you. Now, eUSD will remain capitalized because we can liquidate the collateral pool, and liquidations are permissionless. They're highly efficient. They can happen, you know, whether you have $1 million or not. How the system works is you can literally liquidate up to 20 people at once with a single button click. Super easy peasy. So eUSD holders aren't at risk, but the purpose of liquidations is to essentially pay back eUSD and seize underlying assets. The system is elastic in that, you know, let's say Bitcoin and ETH are doing really good. People can take out more and more loans. And then boom, there's like a flash crash down 70%. We'll need to liquidate and all of those positions by paying off the eUSD, which, yeah, I mean, there's no threat to the stablecoin holder. There's probably threat to like our pocketbooks as participants in DeFi, because those are kind of our preeminent assets. But if there is an issue with Ethereum or Bitcoin, you know, I would say it's likelier that your USDC is probably less safe than something like an eUSD, simply because, oh, the Ethereum narrative is garbage now. Uniswap was hacked or whatever. Some crazy black swan minus 99% hell event has happened. At that point, Fed's moving in and going crazy, pausing assets, pausing USDC transactions, whatever, I think is probably more likely than us not being able to keep up with liquidations. So really, it's kind of like a soft pegged derivative type asset. But the reality is, like, the liquidation system is extremely, extremely efficient, like the most efficient in DeFi. And if you look at something like Liquidity, whose system we borrow for liquidations and for debt management, there are stablecoins at like $1.05 right now because they're so efficient, you know. So we're kind of borrowing from the best, improving, adding a bunch of interesting features and plugging it into our core technology offering. So yeah, that's what I would say to that user. But honestly, like if Ethereum is that down bad, like, bro, we all have a problem.
Okay. So because when you hear like, oh, this is, you know, guaranteed safe, whatever, then it comes to mind, it's like, well, what if something does happen to ETH?
It's not, yeah, it's not like beautifully free of all risks. If in a single block ETH crashes, you know, 50%, nobody can do anything about that, unfortunately. I mean, our system will remain capitalized. It's just the people, the lenders, you know, the people supplying ETH and supplying BTC, their principal is what's crashing. So our system is built to adapt, but, you know, they're holding assets that are going down. So they'll probably lose a lot of money. And on the backside of that, the supply of the USD will shrink in response. But the token itself is a product of its underlying. So really, it's like instead of growing in market cap, or instead of growing in price, rather, there's simply more eUSD in existence. So that's how the market cap grows and shrinks according to demand. And it's in a much more resilient way than a volatile asset. But that's kind of getting into the nitty gritty of things.
And from a security standpoint, what if somebody would say, huh, it sounds great, but now I'm a little bit concerned if, you know, Byte Masons, they have that group, 16 people, or however many employed, 29, they could say, huh, I want to take those funds now. This was all just a evil ploy, and now all of a sudden we're gonna yank the funds from there. What would you say to somebody that would be thinking about that risk?
Yeah, I mean, that would be impossible from a technical standpoint. Well, first of all, I guess that is impossible in Ethos. I guess what maybe we're talking about here is, like, let's say protocol-owned liquidity. So Ethos doesn't have any exposure to, like, people with multi-sigs being jerks. It's like a very self-contained system. But let's say, okay, you have protocol-owned liquidity, like we've been building up liquidity. It's in a multi-sig somewhere being managed. What about that? So that would be, I kind of think, the biggest centralization risk is, no more market liquidity, or much less market liquidity. Two things. One, the system is self-contained and there are redemptions. So you can actually redeem your eUSD at the protocol level in a permissionless way anytime. So that's number one. So you're never going to be without the ability to liquidate collateral. Worst case scenario, if eUSD market liquidity evaporated somehow, you could go right to the protocol and say, hey, I want Bitcoin or ETH back. Please give me, and then go that route. The other side, the more, like, you know, litigious side of things, everybody in our company is doxxed, signs a contract saying we'll operate in good faith and not commit crimes. So really, it's like, okay, let's say people collude and steal the protocol and liquidity. So you need 4 people to team up to do that. And those would be 4 of the highest trust people in the organization. So let's say me, a co-founder, our compliance officer, and our treasury manager all team up and we're like, hey, we're gonna make off with the liquidity. All like finding us one would be really easy because all of us are doxxed and sign contracts. So really, it's like the risk there is someone will need to litigate, probably the people remaining in the company that weren't fraudsters, or the users themselves suing and litigating for those funds back. But the only thing that can happen there is like, oh, it's, you know, we just burn it just to be like the Joker, you know, because Tornado Cash doesn't work, like mixers don't work. You know, Secret Network has a side channel exploit that lets you, you know, read transactions. So I think a lot of privacy networks right now, not great. ZK systems have entries and exits. So really, no matter what, like no matter where we are, we can be pursued legally and the funds can go back. I know that's kind of a long-winded answer, but it's impossible from a technical standpoint to take funds in the protocol. And then beyond that, we're all doxxed. So it's a crime to steal, believe it or not. But yeah.
Well, I like to find out all the risks that exist. So thank you for answering that. And I think that does everything for the ethos. And I'm going to go over to the left side here to Reliquary. So even though I speak English as my primary language, I'll be honest, and I would admit that I did not know what Reliquary meant. So
yeah,
I felt like
we're finding a lot of people don't know how to say the word reliquary. They don't know what a reliquary is. Some don't even know what a relic is. So
yes,
we're kind of on the drawing board. The thing about Reliquary is it's tech. We're working on the branding and things like that. Really what it is, it's a way for us to distribute incentives and align incentives between LPs and ourselves, being the protocol. And the way we do that is, you know, what users are used to is deposit money, you're in there for X amount of time, you get X times Y amount of rewards. Great. What Reliquary does, and that has failed. You know, we see time and time again, every protocol that uses an emission strategy like that inevitably fails because they're facing adversarial market participants and they make no money. It's a pretty big problem. So step one, okay, creating protocols that generate revenue. We're doing that with Reaper, with Granary, with Ethos. Step two, figuring out a way to make bonds in DeFi work and to align incentives in DeFi. So if your viewers aren't familiar, finance exists as like a function of yield, pretty much. So incentives, supply, demand, you know, the basics of economics underpin everything we're doing. So there's no world where everybody is just like, oh, I'm going to deposit my assets here for nothing in return just because I love, you know, Justin Bebis's weird painting in his background. Maybe there's like one person like that, my mom. You know, my mom will do that, but anybody who cares about their finances is not going to do that. My mom does care about her finances, but she also loves me. All right, with that out of the way, how do we create a bond? How do we create an interest-bearing product that makes sense in the context of DeFi for users? So what doesn't work is asset locking. So creating like term bonds or whatever, floating rate bonds is how we see them in crypto. That doesn't work because interest rates are too volatile, underlying assets are too volatile, users get the shaft every time, and protocols just get a bunch of free money, which is good for protocols, great, you know, but users are realizing that, oh, maybe the infinite money glitch doesn't exist. On the other end of that, like protocols, when they just release linear emissions and users just jump in and jump out and take their shirts, it's like, oh, you know, now the protocols are kind of left holding the bag. You know, they're insolvent, they're crying, you know, all their dreams are crushed because mercenary capitalists just want all their cash, which makes sense. You know, this is a permissionless, trustless environment. Of course, you're just trying to make money. Mm-hmm. So what Reliquary does is it takes that, you know, linear schedule or whatever schedule, and it chops it up into tranches that we call maturity tranches. So a maturity tranche is an amount of time that you have provided liquidity, and each maturity tranche is associated with a weight. So we have this set amount of assets being distributed in some emission curve or some way, and users gain a larger share of that depending on how long they have been in the system. So the amount of time they've been depositing their assets, or the amount of time they've been farming or doing whatever, their assets are worth more to us as a protocol. We don't want mercenary liquidity, so we're going to give them a better yield. We're going to give them a better interest-bearing asset. And all of these are wrapped inside of NFTs that are generated on chain. So the end result is like a really like utilitarian asset. And if you're familiar with the concept of convexity, which is kind of a way you evaluate the value or the opportunity cost of a particular interest-bearing product or a particular bond, we now have an asset, and this is unique to DeFi through Reliquary, that increases in convexity over time. So the longer you're in there, the less you're paying in opportunity cost, the more competitive your yield will be per dollar invested. And it's hard for me to like communicate to the layman, and I'm still working on doing it, how revolutionary this is